Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It is I, student Rabbi Shmuel, Rav Shmuel, Stephen Epstein, Shmuel ben Yehoshua, and this week's Torah portion is Shoftim. Now, Shoftim means judgments, it means laws, okay? So last week, Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, went up to Mount Sinai, and he communed with God for 40 days, and he got the Ten Commandments. Now, you remember that the Ten Commandments were said by God. There was a voice that came out, and he and the children of Israel, the Israelites, were told the Ten Commandments, but of course, the Israelites, it was just too much for them. The voice was too pure. They said, no, we've heard the first couple. You take care of the rest. So Moses comes down and delivered the Ten Commandments. Now that we have the basis of our heritage, of our culture, of our religion, as it were, now we start to get into some other commandments, some other laws, some other moralities, some other ethics. And the first series of laws or decrees or judgments that come after the Ten Commandments involves slavery. Now, this bears a little bit of an explanation. The Hebrew word for slave is eved. The Hebrew word for worker is eved, from the Hebrew word oved, lavod, which means to work. Okay, so there's really no distinction. There's no differentiation between a slave and one who works. It's just basically one who works. Now, in Judaism, slavery is a little bit different than other religions and other cultures, because in Judaism, a person is sold into slavery for three different reasons. First of all, it's somebody who's captured in war and they're made to be a servant. Okay. The second one is when a thief has stolen something and they have to make reparations. So they have to basically work off their debt. They have to pay back what they stole plus a fifth. There's always that penalty that they have to work off. And they work it off until one or two things happen. Either the debt is paid off, obviously, or we have the sabbatical year, the seventh year, which is the year that the fields lay fallow. So that's like a rest for fields. Everybody gets a rest. And the third reason is somebody who has fallen on bad times. They're destitute, they're in poverty, and they need a way out. So they go to somebody who is of better means, has more money, has more wealth, and they say, let me work for you, let me work off my poverty, let me work off my debt. So they stay with this person for a number of years, and after that time, they've accumulated some savings. They can go out and basically start a new life, start a new business, as it were, whatever. There is an exception to this. There are people who say, well, I love my master. I don't want to leave him or her or their family. I want to be part of it. They're brought in front of a court where it's determined that it really is this person's desire, this person's sincere desire to remain with the family. I mean, we don't want somebody saying, oh, I really want to be with this family, and really they put up to it by the family because they want cheap labor for a long period of time. And the court determines that, yes, this is really this person's sincere desire, but first they try to talk them out of it, because why do you want to serve a human or a mortal when everybody really is the servant of Hashem, of God? And once it's determined that this person wants this, they want to be a lifelong servant, they don't want their freedom, and it's their intention, then basically their ear is put up to a doorpost, and it all is driven through their ear, letting them know basically that they're marked and this is something that they want to do. And yes, it's a little bit of a shame, because again, why don't you want to be free? I mean, Hashem liberated us from the bondage of the Egyptians, and we did that so we can be free and we can pursue our own lifetimes, and this is somebody who doesn't want to do that. So that's the third reason. So now we're taught the laws that go into how a servant is treated, all right? And this is very important, because servants are basically on the lowest rung of society. And again, the other reason for wanting to free slaves in the seventh year, when the sabbatical year comes, and by the way, okay, the seventh year is marked. It's not you have 7 years. No, if you have to go into servitude and there's 3 years to the sabbatical year, in that third year you're free. Okay. Now, this poses some other issues which are dealt with in the Talmud about, then people aren't going to want to loan money. They're not going to want to have somebody work for them. They give them all this money, or they work for them. It's like a year or two, and then, they don't want to do it because there's only another year to the sabbatical. Okay. So basically what the court decided, or what they determined in the Talmudic period, which is about 2,000 years ago, is that yes, you can start the clock at 7 years. Okay, there were some things that they looked at in the Torah that allowed them to do this. But anyway, what they didn't want to do is have two classes of society, a free class and then a class of servants. So that's why they always encourage people to pay off your debts, get on your feet, and go be a free person. However, while a person is in that condition of servitude, there's some very important things that people have to obey in order to treat the servant well. One of the things is, of course, the person cannot be hit. You cannot mistreat a servant. If you hit a servant and you maim the servant, that is, if they lose the use of a limb, if you knock a tooth out, if you blind them, that servant is now free. So that earns a person a servant, earns a person their freedom. Also, this also introduces the law of what people refer to as lex talionis, the law of the tally. Okay, or some people call it the law of retaliation, which, as most people know, is eye for eye, tooth for tooth, limb for limb, life for life. Now, this contrasts with the Code of Hammurabi. I'm not sure if it's Hammurabi, Hammurabi, okay, which basically is that if you cause a person to lose the use of an arm, for example, of their right arm, you're taken into the court and they pound your arm until you can't use your arm. That's law, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life. But here's where it gets into difficulty. If you're walking by the house of your neighbor, and the neighbor's son is up on the ladder and they're fixing the roof, and you knock the ladder off and the son comes down, falls down and let's say breaks his leg, okay, what's the punishment? It means that they get your son and they bring him into court and they mess up his leg. That's eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life, lex talionis, okay? In Judaism, it's not quite like that. First of all, let's remember that we're dealing with 3,000, 3,500 years ago when they didn't have quite the technology that we have today. So if you accidentally poke out your neighbor's eye, and what are they going to do? Poke out your eye? How are they going to do that? What if they poke out your eye and you end up bleeding and you die? It's no longer eye for eye, is it? It's life for eye, and that's not what the law is. So basically, because of some verbiage before and after where that appears in the Torah, they talk about money and compensation. The sages determined that really that's just an indication. Eye for eye is really how much is an eye worth. And the penalty, not the penalty, the justice, the judgment would be how much is that eye worth. And that's something that the courts would determine. Okay, so that's a mark of humanity. Again, that is treating people well, treating people in a humane way. Right? So also we talk about some other laws that are involved. It talks about if you kill somebody, whether it's intentional or accidental, for example. So an intentional killing it's life for life. That's capital punishment. Right? If it's premeditated, if you go after the person, if you've planned it, and very important, there are two witnesses that saw you do it, heard you plan it, then your life is forfeit, right? But again, two witnesses who saw you, who knew you were going to do it, then you're found guilty and your life is forfeit. The other killing could be manslaughter. Manslaughter is typically unintentional. So if somebody accidentally kills somebody, and typically back then there was the blood feud, right? There was the blood vengeance, all right? The member of the family would go after you and kill you because you accidentally killed their family. So in order to avoid this, in order to show mercy to the person who it was, again, determined by the court, accidental death, there were cities of refuge, very similar to what we have going on today with the immigrants in a way. Cities of refuge, which were Levite cities. Levites were the people that served the temple, served the priests. Okay, so you would go there and you would stay there until the head priest died, and then you were free. All right, so that was to save your life and make sure that you were safe from the vengeance of a family member. So that is basically the nuts and bolts of this week's portion, Shoftim. So everybody have a Shabbat Shalom. Just kind of as a side note, Sunday, in a couple of days, or actually it's tomorrow night, starts a new month, the month of Adar. Adar is the last month of the Hebrew year, and the 15th of Adar is the date that we have Purim. And that, of course, was the time when the Jews were set up to be killed by Haman, and you can all make your noise, do your groggers. We got that in about 2 weeks, and at that point we'll talk a little bit more about that. So again, Shabbat Shalom, and may you have a nice rest, and may you have, after that, a very fruitful, prosperous, and happy week. Shabbat Shalom.